Radhi's never let me define my self-worth based on my success. So when I first started to experience success, Radhi didn't celebrate it in the way I wanted her to. And I'd wanted my wife to be my number one fan and my biggest cheerleader. And she wasn't for my career. But I had to realize if I skewed my perspective, she was for who I was. So if it came to my character, that's what she was backing. I think we all want to be loved for who we are and not loved for what we achieve.
I did start listening to your podcast last year, though. I mean, that's...
Welcome to the My Legacy podcast, where we explore what it truly means to create a living legacy through our actions, our choices, and the way we show up for others every day. We're honored to be joined by Jay Shetty, global best-selling author and purpose-driven entrepreneur whose wisdom on love, mindfulness, and personal transformation has reached millions through his #1 podcast, On Purpose. Now, of course, what makes the My Legacy podcast unique is we don't just hear from extraordinary individuals. We hear from their life partners, their friends, the people who know them best. And we're beyond lucky because Jay is joined today by his incredible wife, Radhi Devlukia. She is a nutritionist. She is a best-selling author of Joyful. She is the host of her own podcast, A Really Good Cry. I love that title. She's a powerful force for wellness, for conscious living, and for joyful cooking. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're so grateful to be back with you and reunited with all of you. Thank you so much for having us. We're so honored and so grateful. Truly, it was such a wonderful to be in your presence a year ago now, or is it even longer?
It was about a year ago.
Yep. It was about a year ago, I feel.
Yes.
And so wonderful to be reunited. And I wish you were meeting Radhi in person too.
I know.
We'll settle for this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we must do dinner when we're all on the same coast again.
We
together.
would love that.
Yes.
We would absolutely love that.
Yes.
Well, Jay, on that note, because we gotten to know you over, probably a decade now, but we don't know Radhi as well. So if I can put you on the spot, the two of you have created this incredible relationship based on conscious living, on purpose, on joy. So how did you first meet this incredible woman, and how did you know that she was your person?
So the interesting thing is the first episode of my podcast, On Purpose, ever was me and Radhi telling this story together. And I always wanted to start the show at a really authentic, genuine, conscious place. And I thought, why not do it with the person who knows me best and knows me most deeply? And so the long story short version is I was in my final year of college and I knew that I was going to become a monk after I graduated. And I would go to my local temple to serve and assist on the weekends just to stay out of trouble. And when I was doing that service, I was asked to show a woman around who was around my mum's age with different chores and different practices at the temple. I'd never been asked to do this before. This was the first time. I showed her around. She was very sweet. And then at the end of it, she said to me, I have a daughter that I'd love to introduce to spirituality and meditation. And I said, well, I'm going to become a monk, so I can introduce her to my younger sister who's also involved in the community. And why don't you bring her in? And so, that week she brought her in, and it happened to be my wife's mom, and Radhi was her daughter who came in. And I introduced Radhi and my sister. And I remember seeing Radhi and thinking she was the most beautiful woman in the world. And I thought, no, focus. You need to go and become a monk. And so I kind of shut it out. And then when I came back from the monastery, Radhi and my sister had become best friends. And so my sister was our matchmaker. So that's how we met. And then how I knew she was the one. It's really interesting. Someone asked me this question recently, and I think I gave at least what I believe to be a truthful and honest answer, and is that I don't know if you ever know. I think you commit and invest to building something together, and because the other person also wants to commit and build and invest in you, and that's what makes them the one. And I really believe that it's quite naive to think when you meet someone or when you move in with someone or when you marry someone that this is going to be the person you're with for 3 or 4 or 5 decades in today's world. And so for me, I know that Radhi's the one because she invest every day today more than even when we started. And that's something that I can only discover today. And I couldn't have known 12 years ago when we first got together and 9 years ago when we got married. I couldn't have possibly known that. And so I hope that frees people up from this pressure and expectation that I've got to find this person on day one and know that they're going to be perfect and the person, when I probably would have said that 12 years ago if you asked me. Like, I found the one, I know it. Now when I look back, I'm like, no, I'm lucky she's proved me right, but she very easily could have proved me wrong. And so I'm very grateful that she's, stood by me through so many ups and downs and so many incredible journeys that we've been on.
So, Radhi, I'm very, very curious. So you're at a temple and you see this wonderful human being that was training to be a monk. At what was going through your mind when you first met him?
That's a really good question. He was in white robes at the time, weren't you? Yeah, he was training to be a monk. He was in white robes. He knew my mom. It was like a very odd situation. My mom was introducing us. And so when I saw him, it was interesting because he had like tattoos in monk clothes. Was a very like well-spoken person, where normally in my mind a monk was someone who was from India, and I, usually would have to speak to them in another language. And so it was kind of changing a lot of narratives in my mind of what I expected to see when my mom was like, oh, I want to introduce you to this monk. So I think I was readjusting to my expectations. And then, I started going to his classes and hearing him speak about spirituality. And honestly, I think I fell in awe of him through watching him in those spaces and in the community. And I ended up being an observer of him rather than a friend at the beginning, because we didn't really have a friendship or a relationship at all when we first met. So it was quite nice seeing him in his own environment doing something that he loved. And so at first it was almost like he felt like a teacher and a guide more than he felt like someone that I was thinking I could be with. But then when I became friends with his sister and she kept telling me all these amazing things about him, I was like, oh, he's so sweet. And they have the sweetest relationship. He is like a father figure to her, and she loves him so much. And I thought, well, someone who's got that relationship with their sister, and usually your sibling has the best and worst things to say about you, and she just loved him so much. And so there was moments where, I kept saying to her, I was like, I think I really like your brother. And she was like, you can't. He's going to be a monk for the rest of his life. You better leave him alone. She was like, I need you to leave him alone, please.
Leave him alone.
Yeah, please. I'm just telling you, he wants to be a monk forever. So, I kind of gave up on that idea. And so as soon as he came out from being a monk and we got to know each other, we both just realized how right we ended up being about each other, as he said. And it was a nice surprise because it could have gone both ways,
I love that you said fell in awe rather than fell in love. I don't think I've ever really heard that way. That's a beautiful,
it is.
Yes,
it
you
is.
fell in awe.
Well, the one thing she left out was that she usually tells a bit of like, you didn't clarify that actually when we first met, you just didn't notice me and didn't recognize,
Yeah. Well, no, I did notice you. I just wasn't like, it wasn't like my mum saying, hey, here's someone for you to meet in that way. It was,
No. But
it was, hey, here's a monk. You
Here's a
better
monk.
learn from him.
Yeah. Here's a monk.
Yeah.
Every great journey begins with the foundation that we come from. The people who raised us, those who, sowed into us, the people who believed in us. So, Jay, who were the most influential people in your life, in your childhood, and what would you say are some of the biggest lessons that they passed on to you?
That's such an interesting question. I feel I was very, very fortunate that the most influential people in my life became people I discovered through autobiographies and biographies. So, and that's because I think I was the eldest and I kind of was a bit rebellious. So I didn't really fit in, and I don't think I was getting that much great advice from my family or extended family. And I fell in love with, I think I mentioned this to you when we first met. I fell in love with the writings of Dr. Martin Luther King. I fell in love with Malcolm X. I fell in love with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and David Beckham. So my reading spectrum was fairly wide. But I was reading the biographies and autobiographies and writings of all of these individuals. And so there were pop culture icons like David Beckham and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And then these incredible historical figures to me in Martin Luther King and in Malcolm X. And that really, truly became the basis of the advice in my life. I really, really believed that I associated with these people through their writing. I really believed that they became my wise advisors. They became my board of directors. And they became the people that I turned to in times of difficulty because they'd been through so much more than I'd ever even have to fathom going through. And so there felt to be an incredible strength in that. And I think because my dad was fairly aloof and disconnected from me when I was young, it really gave me a freedom to look for that. And now I look back, and I didn't know this then, but I assume I was looking for male role models at the time or people that I could hold on to. So it's no surprise that all the books I was reading were men. And at the same time, my monk teachers, who I really do see as father figures to me as well, have become incredible pillars in my life. And I'm really grateful to my dad for that. You know, I think a lot of people may feel that if their parents are slightly disconnected or aloof, it can be a bad thing. For me, it was great. I got to become the man I wanted to be. I got to build an image of who I wanted to be, and I got to choose the people that I really aspired to learn from and gain insight from. And so those individuals, whether it was reading about how David Beckham on a Friday night would tie a car tire in the top hand corner of a goalpost and practice taking free kicks while all his friends were out drinking and partying and all the rest of it, or whether it was talking about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's challenges with depression and finding himself, or whether, of course, it was the incredible work of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. It was just fascinating to gain insight from what I believe to be some of the most powerful, incredible, and beautiful people who've walked the earth.
That's so amazing. And it resonates so deeply with me because you all know how much I love reading. Yes. I love reading. And I don't know if we talked about this, Jay, when we were together, but when I was a little girl in elementary school, I spent a lot of time in the library of my school, and I went through almost the entire autobiography and biography section of my school. I got special awards for that. So I really resonate with that, like, you know, taking bits and pieces of, I always found inspiration in people's stories.
Well, we can testify to this because you two haven't, I don't think, yet been to the King's house. We got to make this happen, though. But you've got the most amazing shoe closet that's full of
books.
Books. Your shoe closet is full of books. I love it.
I love it.
Yes.
Not just the shoe closet. It's everywhere. So you just kind of walk in and you garner knowledge. You don't even have to open.
Although Martin hates traveling with me and with my book bag.
I don't hate it. It's just a heavy lift.
There you go.
That's so true. When we moved to New York 9 years ago, I had I only had like two suitcases with me, and one of them was full of clothes and things like that, and the other one was completely full of books.
Yes.
And that's how we traveled. And I was like, no, I can't leave these behind. And I'm still into physical books. I'm not a fan of digital books at all.
You and I both. And Radhi, you said that your family's journey from being refugees to building a new life shaped the way that you see the world. What lesson from your upbringing would you say continues to guide you today?
So many things. My grandma was born and raised in India and then moved to Uganda when she got married to my granddad. And from there, she then became a refugee when she came into Scotland with absolutely nothing. They couldn't bring anything with them. And it was so interesting because even from the moment that I feel like my first memory of my grandma has been, she has spent her whole life just in service to family, to community. Whether it was in the refugee camp, she was one of the first people to start cooking in the kitchen for the community because they weren't used to eating the food from the UK. They wanted to eat food that was part of their culture. And so my grandma got in the kitchen and she was cooking for everyone. Even when she had nothing, she was still doing things for other people. And so I think that's been a thread of all I've seen her do. And not ever have I seen a moment of resentment through doing it. And, I always think about, you're doing too much or beyond your capacity when you start becoming resentful or feeling like you deserve something back for doing what you've been doing. But my grandma, I've never seen, she's 91 now, and she is still the most joyful, content, like self-content human that I've met. And I honestly think it's because she gave with zero expectation throughout her life. And certain situations put her into a moment where she had to do that, whether she wanted to or not, but it became part of her. And so I think that watching her has made me want to do the same for people around me. And, also her deep spiritual practice. Like, my grandma speaks to God more than she speaks to humans. And I don't say that lightly. She spends more hours of her day in prayer, speaking to God, than she does actually interacting with humans, at least for the past 10 years that I've seen. She wakes up in the morning at 3:30 in the morning. She's praying till 9 a.m. She's then back in prayer by 2 p.m. till 3 o'clock, back in prayer again from 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. and then again in the evening before she goes to bed. And so I think you can only really give that to people when you've given yourself that deeper connection to God or the universe that's empowering you to be able to actually give to others in that capacity. So those are just a couple of the things, but yeah, so many things. And my mum and my dad both emulate that same nature too.
From my experience, it's often the struggles that define who we are. Many times we know the glory, but we don't necessarily know the story of the individual. So, Jay, can you share or take us back to one of the toughest moments in your journey and what ultimately it taught you?
It's so interesting, isn't it, when you're asked to think about a tough moment in your life, you almost just see it as your life. And so you don't, I don't know, I never grew up. I only recognized when I got older and I spoke to people about experiences I went through that they were tough, because up until that point, they were just my life and they just felt normal. And you kind of assume everyone's going through those things. And so I think we all walk around thinking that everyone should understand us because they went through the same thing. And the truth is we don't understand each other because we went through very different things. And until you meet someone who's gone through something that you can connect with or resonate with, it's really hard to reconcile it. I think for me, a big part of it was that I grew up in a home that I mediated my parents' marriage. And I would say that that was the most challenging thing growing up, because I didn't wake up to a great environment. And I think for me, that made me who I am today. And so I have a lot of gratitude for that and appreciation for that. But I think a lot of people see me and the work I do today, and they often see the marriage I have with my wife today and our connection and relationship. And it comes from just having a long list of what not to do. And so I think often in life, you could get an amazing experience. And when you get that, you should write down everything you should do. And sometimes you're going to get a really painful experience. And in that, you should write down everything you should never do. And so partly what I'm grateful to have today is a list of what not to do in a relationship. And I'm very grateful that I got those lessons and those messages, because they allowed me to really be conscious about who I wanted to be, what I wanted to build, how I wanted to grow. And so that was very, very early on in my life. And I really believe that today, the reason why I have the ability to listen to people and their pain, and why I feel empathetic and compassionate to pretty much all experiences, is because I remember doing that for my parents. I remember listening to my mum for hours and hearing her challenges and recognizing that they were real. And I remember sitting to my dad for hours and recognizing his challenges and that they were real. And what it taught me was to look beyond the person and find context to how they became that way. And I think this is what we often don't think of. We think, why are you that way? But we don't ask the question, how did you become that way? Or what happened to you that's where you are today? And I think that's a better question. And I think when I started to look into the pasts of my parents, I started to notice so much more information and experiences and pain and stress that they'd been through that had made them that way. And so I felt very grateful to be loved by both of them, and to this day feel my mother's unconditional love in the most special way. But being there for both of them was a really interesting challenge growing up. But it's why I do what I do for a living today. So I'm not mad about it.
Well, Jay, we're so inspired by that context of how you've become such an incredible voice. Radhi, I wanted to ask you a question. You've dedicated so much of your life to helping others heal. What's a moment in your life where you've had to heal yourself?
That's a good question. I feel like I'm healing on a daily basis, but I'd say a place where I felt I needed the most amount of growth and noticed the most amount of growth was when me and Jay first got married. We moved to New York, and it was the first time I'd really moved away from family, moved away from home, moved to a place where I pretty much knew nobody, and we were starting from scratch. And I grew up as the youngest child where most things were done for me. Whether it was like me doing my homework late, my sister would stay up late and help me. Whether any decision I would make, my mum would help me make it. I really wasn't used to doing things for myself or by myself. And so when we moved to New York, I also had been studying for a long time, only to move with Jay to have a spouse visa where I couldn't work. And so I found myself in a weird position of just feeling lost and having to get to know myself in ways that I never had before. I was able to hide behind the work I did or my family or the community I was part of. And all of that was kind of stripped away from me to only come to realize I absolutely did not know myself at all. I didn't know how to choose colors of things that I liked. I didn't know how to make decisions for myself. I didn't know whether I wanted something or didn't. And so it became this journey of just starting to learn about who I actually was. Like I grew up just thinking I wanted what my family wanted, or I liked what my sister liked, because I didn't spend the time to really get to know what my wants or needs were. And so I spent a lot of my time in New York walking around, crying down the streets, which seemed really normal in New York. No one seemed to care. And then having to do some seriously deep work of figuring out what is it that I like and dislike and want in my life. And so I'd say that took a lot of healing, because I had to also unlearn things that I had, I thought that I knew about myself based on other people. And I had to realize that those were all views from others and perceptions of others that I had to step away from, because maybe I didn't want that narrative of myself and I wanted to create a new one. So, yeah, I'd say that was probably the time I've had to heal the most.
I love that.
That's beautiful. It's interesting, too, because we have an eldest child married to a younger child.
Yes, yes, exactly.
So you're making it work.
Yeah.
And as I'm hearing your idea, I think that obviously all of our stories are so unique, but I do think that what you just shared is so indicative to a lot of women as well. Kind of
definitely.
finding our voices, finding what it is that are, aligning to our desires and honoring our desires. And so I think that was a beautiful share. And I think that so many women in particular can find themselves within that story.
No, I was just thinking about, I think we go through this ebb and flow of being lost and found regularly. And I always used to think that once you figure out what you want to do or who you are, it's just an upward trajectory. But I've realized that you end up, when you end up realizing that being lost is part of life's journey, like you are always going to feel a little bit lost as you go along life, because experiences happen, things happen that you don't expect to. You realize that it's actually part of it. It's not an obscure thing that only you are going through, because I feel like I've gone through moments of feeling really found and understood to only feel really lost again. And then I feel really in my purpose and in my power, and then I feel lost again. And so I think that ebb and flow is something that we have to realize is actually just part of it. I don't think it is. I don't think it's the exception. I think it is actually the rule of life, and it's part and parcel of it.
Yes, I love that. I think also that's almost the progress as it relates to humanity in a way. I think we think that progress is linear, but it really is. It is more in the ebbs and flow, and keeping hold to that vision and that the dream that's inside of you. So, okay, we know the challenges of working with your your partner.
There's challenges? Really? Are you serious? Oh,
you
my
know,
goodness.
it's wonderful.
Martin's just smiling. He's not saying a word right now.
You're like, it's so wonderful.
Yeah.
All the time. All the time. Every day.
How do you all navigate through those challenges?
How do we deal with working with each other? Like
I noticed very wisely Jay is deferring the question.
Yes.
I know. He's like, let me see what she says before I share my perspective.
Martin's not.
I would say, you know, the good thing is we both have extremely different skill sets. Like, we are very different humans. And so what's great in that sense is Jay handles a lot of the things that I don't want to. Or don't have the skills to, I would say. Like, he's really good at the business side of things, and I really enjoy the creative side of things. And so, especially for the main project we work on together is Junie, our tea company. And so he does a lot of the business management calls. Is that what you'd call it?
sure.
No, like the finance stuff and what else would you call it?
Strategic stuff.
The strategic stuff, yeah. And I really like doing the creative, working with the team to do events and building the brand, the flavors of the the flavors, the intricacies behind what we actually put into the product. And so honestly, we're not often on the same calls. And so we do work together, but I wouldn't
So that's
say
the secret.
That's the secret. Yeah.
We've only ever, the only thing we've ever done together work-wise is our tea company, Junie. And that was really exciting because that was something that we shared in common. We both wanted to drink drinks that didn't have sugar. So we wanted to build a 0-gram sugar drink. We wanted something with low calories, so it only has 5 calories. We wanted something that was filled with ashwagandha and reishi mushroom and all these things that we know we should be taking. And so that's why we focused on that. But the reason why it is easy to work on it together is because we founded the company many years into our marriage. And I think by then we have a good understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses, and we have a lot of trust. So I know if Radhi's on a call about flavor profiles, I know she understands flavor profiles far better than I ever would. My palate is really basic. Right? Before I met her, I had no idea what any of these incredible herbs and plant extracts and adaptogens are. And so her level of knowledge in that field is something I can trust. It's something I would back. It's something I feel very confident in. And thankfully, she feels that way about me and my strengths. And so I think that's why it works for us. I don't think I could... I think I'd find it hard if we had similar skill sets and we were constantly debating and figuring it out. I quite like the divide and conquer. So. It works well.
Well, we love your tea company. We love your tea brand. Jay, in your international best-selling book, 8 Rules of Love, you talk about what it takes to nurture a relationship. Can you give us 1 or 2 of your top suggestions on how you can continuously strengthen bonds between couples?
Should be asking all of you this, but I'll try my best. I'm sure there's a lot more wisdom on that side of the table, so I feel underqualified. But I would say one of my favorite ones is, I have a chapter in the book called Your Partner is Your Guru. And what I mean by that is that not that they're an authoritative, judgmental, dictatorial individual, because that's not what a guru is. A guru is someone who's dedicated to your growth, who's committed to helping you find your path, and who's patient while you do it. That's actually what a guru is, especially in the Eastern traditions. And one of my favorite things about that is that your partner is really a mirror. And the challenge we have in relationships is that the right partner holds up the mirror in a non-judgmental way. But we're so convinced that the mirror is broken because we don't like what we see that we reject them. So we reject the one person who actually has the ability to help us grow. And so Radhi has been completely non-judgmental, empathetic, and compassionate about my health journey. When I met Radhi, I was addicted to sugar. I ate a lot of fried food. I was fairly unhealthy physically. And because I had a strong mind and meditated daily and felt like I'd got somewhere with that journey, I felt like my body almost didn't matter. I almost felt like it was an afterthought. And she didn't teach me by telling me I was wrong and that I was wasting time, that I was being lazy and that I should work out more, because none of those things would have helped me, because my ego would have come to my defense and been a shield and pushed back. And I would have been affected by that, like I think we all are. Instead, she set the example. She's worked out every day I've known her. She's eaten a clean diet. She's always cooked healthy food. She encouraged me and educated me in the challenges of how I was living without making me feel bad about them. And she's been my guru for my health. And so to me, when your partner's your guru and you allow your partner to teach you in a non-judgmental, non-confrontational, non-finger-pointing way, that is the person who can help you grow. There's no one on planet Earth who could make you a better human being than the person you spend the most time with. So that your partner's your guru is probably one of them. And I think you said a couple. I would add that the problem is we often want our partners to change. But what we don't have is the patience that it takes to watch them change. Mm. And we also want them to change into the people we want them to be, not the people that they want them to be. We see their potential and we say, you must rise to this. We see the possibility and we say, you must reach this. We see the result for them that we've projected and we say, if you don't get to this, you've failed. And never have we asked them, who do you want to be? How do you want to live your life? What are you trying to accomplish? And it's really interesting to me that we believe just because we want to invest in them, that care is greater than their ambition. And I think we work so hard. We want to be their savior. We want to be the person to solve all their problems. We want to be the person who fixes everything for them just to feel good about ourselves. We don't actually want them to be happy. We just want to be happy that we're doing something for them. And so we don't really give them the patience, the time, the energy to find who they are and move in that direction for themselves, because we want to feel like we're helping, we're fixing, I'm here to solve all your problems. And in that, you try to be the person who saves them, but actually you push them away. So those would be my two biggest things that I think if we can, on the first hand, learn to be a guru that's non-judgmental, and on the second hand, learn to be patient and let people become who they want to be, not try to make them who we want them to be.
I love that on a personal note, because I'm going to own that. And I think a lot of guys who are husbands need to own that, just being radically transparent, because you called it as it is. Like, it is this male desire to want to help, to want to protect. And so often it is that instead, that patience, that sitting in it. And I love that phrase. I wrote that down. Like, the idea of supporting who they want to be, asking them, who they want to be, and then supporting them with that patience on that journey, not wanting to help, not wanting to protect, even though it comes from a good place, just giving the space. I just, so many husbands out there, anyone who's listening who wants to play that clip back on social media for someone in their life to sit with, I just want to encourage them to sit with that for a few minutes. I love the honesty of that advice.
Well, and the partner is your guru is just so profound.
Yeah, it's changed my life. I didn't know all this before I got married. I think you figure it out when you are married, and then you start learning how much it has to teach you and how much better you have to become because you love someone. And I think that's the difference. The right person inspires you to want to become better, not want to make them better. Like, I think we're constantly worrying about, oh God, they're not doing this and they're not doing that and they're not doing this. And the right person makes you look at yourself and go, well, I'm not doing that. So let me start there.
This is a very simple thing, but it's very important. I rarely get sick, and I'm blessed and fortunate. But a lot of that in my mind is because every day, not a day goes by that Arndrea doesn't put out vitamins for me. Now, I would like to be, that's a simple thing. I'd love to be able to do that, and I will get there. But that constantly reinforces, when your partner loves you so much that they're very concerned about your being healthy, being able to go out into the world as many of us have to do. So I want to ask you both, what simple thing does your partner do to show that they love you?
My gosh, Jay's a very expressive person, but it's not just the words that he uses. Like, he is someone who will verbally check in and be like, what can I do to make you happier? Is there any way I can help you? And he says that to me on a regular basis. So I think one part of it is being vocal about how you want to be there for your partner, which I actually wasn't very good at, and I'm still getting better at, to actually vocalize it. In my mind, I see myself as more of an acts of service, which is how I've seen my parents be. So I'd be like, oh, but in my mind, I've cooked a meal and I've done this little thing. But sometimes you realize that actually having those vocal moments are really important, and how much that makes a difference in a relationship. But then in action, it's like the little things of, even if he's just sat down when I've sat down and I need something, he'll get back up. Like, if I won't get back up, he'll get back up to get it for me. Or if I am feeling...
I hate that one.
I know, you still do it. And it's those little things where you just notice someone going out of their way for you, because not many people want to go out of their way for you. And then another one is whenever I'm I'm quite an emotional person, and whenever he feels my energy is a little bit off, he'll always, no matter what he's got going on, he'll always make space and time to just check in and be like, do you need help with anything? Can I sit with you? I can work through, whether it's a work thing, whether it's a family thing. He always creates the time and space, no matter how busy, to have those moments of connection if he feels like I really need it. And so, I could probably go on, but I'll leave it there. Those are a couple of them, but yeah, there's so many different ways he expresses himself, actually.
Jay?
Yeah, so many as well. I think for me, the biggest one is, I think when we first got married and we moved to New York, and then we were kind of there for a couple of years, then moving to LA, and we've just been through so much change, and change that wasn't anticipated or expected. So change that we both had planned to live our whole lives 15 minutes from our local temple in England and 5 minutes away from Radhi's parents' home. And actually, that was one of her requirements for us getting married, was that she could be a 1 mile radius away from her parents' home. And I'd committed to that, and I genuinely had committed to that. It was something that I thought was very real. All of our friends are in that area, families in that area. It made sense. And then all of a sudden, my career took a turn in 2016 when this part of my life started to grow, and it's continued to for the 9 years, thankfully. And if I'm completely honest, that was completely not part of the plan, not my plan, not her plan, not our plan, but it was what I couldn't even have dreamed of. And not once in the last 9 years has Radhi ever said to me, look what I gave up for you. And, oh God, I could cry saying this, but it's one of those things. It's like, I know how much her parents mean to her. I know how much her family, friends mean to her. I know how much London means to her. And for her to move away, for her to give that up when we didn't have clarity, like, we're very fortunate today to have a wonderful life, but getting here wasn't easy. I was away a lot. I traveled a lot for work. I was building things, moving around, and never once did she say, I gave this all up for you. You're never around. You work too hard. And I think that kind of trust, without nagging, without making someone feel bad, when I was already carrying the burden of it myself. And I think that's the feeling that makes you feel loved, where you're like, I was already feeling that way myself. So if she would have said it to me, it probably would have broken me. But the fact that she didn't feel that she had to say it to me makes me feel loved. So not blaming, not shaming, not pushing, not prodding it feels like a small thing, but actually it's huge. And even at the most difficult times in our life, whether we were financially struggling, struggling with moving, changing, whatever things were going on in our life, every time I'd update her on what would happen, she'd always say, I trust you. And hearing your partner say that when you don't even know what's going to happen next is the greatest sign of love. And so, Radhi decided to date me and commit to a relationship with me when I had nothing to offer but myself. And so that's a pretty big thing. She could have married anyone she wanted to marry. And so her decision to be with someone who didn't have a even a secure job when we first started dating, and, you know, someone who'd been in the monastery for 3 years and didn't have any sort of savings or any sort of plan. I think it shows her character and her ability to, you know, go beyond material things. And the more recent one, I mean, I could go on as well. I think the more recent
You don't
one,
need to go on.
Radhi's never let me define my self-worth based on my success. So when I first started to experience success, Radhi didn't celebrate it in the way I wanted her to. And I'd wanted my wife to be my number one fan and my biggest cheerleader. And she wasn't for my career. But I had to realize if I skewed my perspective, she was for who I was. So if it came to my character, that's what she was backing. She wasn't backing me because of my career. And that helped me detach from valuing myself based on the success of my career, because I think that's what I would have done and what I would have wanted if she had fallen in that way. And so her lack of validation for my career was the greatest validation for my character.
Her not caring.
Her not
just
caring.
been great to humble
but I
me.
mean, I think it's a huge thing. And again, Craig, going back to the men point, I think a lot of men, like, we want our partners to be like front row. We want them to be the cheerleader. Like, we've got that culture. And I'm not saying that my wife isn't my cheerleader in that, but I'm saying your wife's cheerleading your character, not your career. That's better. Because the career's up and down. Like, the career's going to do whatever it's going to do, but your character's who you are. Like, what do you want to be loved for? Do you want to be loved for the amount of followers you have? Or do you want to be loved for who you are and how you show up and what she believes you represent? And so I think it's genuinely, we're laughing about it and it can have funny connotations, but I want to clarify, like, the point is, I think we all want to be loved for who we are and not loved for what we achieve.
I did start listening to your podcast last year, though. I mean, that's...
You guys are hilarious. I love this.
Well, and Jay, I love that your voice was cracking, like the sniffles. No, I should have done going like, stop, you don't have to keep going. I can see like Radhi's eyes starting welling up, the two of you. It's awesome.
You're a great lesson in the languages of love. Yes. And acknowledging that we all love different ways and we receive love differently. And the ongoing challenge is to find the love language of your partners or your children or your work, because and what I keep hearing is that you all do that. You all kind of ask of what language does Radhi speak and show love, or what language does Jay speak, and then how can I show them love in my language? And I just think that's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And we're just getting started with Jay and Radhi. Jay and Radhi's journey isn't just about love. It's about becoming the best version of yourself. Next week, we shift from love to life's greatest lessons, what they do for their own mental health, wellness, and the unexpected daily habits that keep them grounded. If you think part 1 was insightful, just wait until you hear part 2. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Join us next week for part 2 of My Legacy. If you enjoyed today's conversation, subscribe and share the podcast with friends, family, and loved ones, and follow us on social media at My Legacy Movement. At the heart of this podcast is Dr. King's vision of the beloved community and the power of connection. This podcast is a testament to that vision and the product of collective effort, enriched by the voices, stories, and support of so many. My Legacy podcast is available on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.